On her own wedding day, Ihuoma was treated like the daughter nobody had ever wanted. Her stepsister was handed the rich groom and a gown that cost more than the house. Ihuoma was given the ragged stranger who rolled up to the gate on a rusted bicycle, the man the whole compound pointed at and laughed at. But one secret was already inside that courtyard, waiting, and before the day was over, it would turn every laugh into shame. So before we begin, tell me where you are watching from, and remember this as you listen. Because not every poor-looking man is a poor man. The morning the marriage was arranged, Ihuoma was on her knees in the backyard, scrubbing the bottom of a blackened cooking pot with sand and ash. The harmattan dust had settled over everything in Owerri that week, a thin gray film on the leaves, on the gate, on the roof of the big house her father had built before his business collapsed. She heard her stepmother's slippers slapping the concrete before she heard the voice. Ihuoma, leave that. Your father is calling a family meeting. Ulari stood in the doorway, with her arms folded across her wide Ankara wrapper, gold rings on 4 fingers, and a look on her face that Ihuoma had learned to read, like weather. That look meant something had been decided already, and Ihuoma would be told, not asked. In the parlor, her father sat in his worn armchair, thinner than he had been a year ago, his hands trembling slightly on the armrests. Mazi Obiora had once been a man who filled a doorway. Now his agbada hung loose on his shoulders, and his eyes did not meet his daughter's. "Sit down, my child," he said. Ihuoma sat. Across from her, on the good sofa, sat Ezine, her stepsister, in a fresh lace blouse, scrolling her phone, one leg crossed over the other. Ezine did not look up. "There is a family," her father began, "that has asked to marry into this house. They are not rich people. The young man works with his hands. But they came correctly, with kola nut and palm wine, and they have asked for a wife." Ihuoma waited. Somewhere in her chest, a small, foolish hope lifted, because no man had ever asked for her before. "They asked," her father went on, and now his voice dropped, "for the elder daughter." Ezine's head snapped up at last. "Which elder daughter?" "Ihuoma is the elder," Ulari said smoothly, settling onto the arm of the sofa beside her own daughter. "By 2 years. It is only right that she marries first. We cannot have the younger one married while the elder sits at home like a cracked plate nobody wants." The words landed exactly where they were aimed. Ihuoma kept her face still, the way she had taught herself to do years ago, when crying only earned her more. "A poor man," Ezine said, and laughed, a short, bright sound. "Of course, a poor man for the poor girl. They suit each other." She turned back to her phone. "Just keep him away from my own wedding. I am marrying Chukwuma's son in 3 months, and his people are flying in from Lagos. I do not want some bricklayer at my gate embarrassing me." "It is settled," Mazi Obiora said quickly, before anything could grow. "The introduction is this Saturday. The marriage the Saturday after. They asked for it to be done quickly, and a quick wedding costs us little." He glanced at his wife as he said the last part, and Ihuoma understood. There would be no aso ibi, no caterers, no canopy of fairy lights. Whatever could be saved on her would be spent on Ezine. "Father," Ihuoma said softly. It was the first word she'd spoken. "May I at least meet him before Saturday?" Ulari answered for him. "Why? So you can be choosy? A girl your age, with no work, no degree finished, no money of her own? Be grateful a man wants you at all. Some of us would have left you to dry up." Ihuoma rose, gathered the hem of her faded wrapper, and walked back to the pot in the yard. She knelt again in the dust. The sand had gone cold in the bowl. She scrubbed anyway, because if her hands were busy, her face had an excuse to be wet. She did not yet know his name, nor could she have guessed that 2 streets away, in a room she could never have imagined, a young man was telling his own mother a thing that would frighten any mother. That young man was Chidi. And that same morning, in a house with marble floors and a long glass table, his mother was already arguing with him. "Tell them who you are," Nwadiuto said. She set down the cup of tea she had not touched. "I am begging you. Go to that compound as my son, as your father's son, and let them treat you the way you deserve." Chidi only smiled, the calm, gentle smile that drove his mother to the edge of her patience. He was a tall young man, 6 feet with short, neat black hair and a careful line of stubble along a strong jaw, deep brown skin, and eyes that always held something back, some quiet amusement at the world. "If I go as myself," he said, "I will never know who the girl really is. They will dress her up and parade her and tell her to smile. I want to know what kind of heart waits inside that house. The only way to weigh a person honestly is to come with empty hands." "And the bicycle?" His mother's voice rose. "You will ride that rusted thing to a wedding? You who could send 3 convoys. Especially the bicycle." Chidi reached over and took her hand. "Mama, I have watched my friends marry women who love the cars and the names and the houses. 2 of them are already divorced. I would rather be laughed at by everyone in that compound than wake up one day beside a woman who only married the building I own." Nwadiuto pulled her hand back, but gently. "Even a good lie is still a lie, Chidi. Your father will not like this." "My father did the same thing to find you," Chidi said. "Ask him." She had no answer for that because it was true, and the truth of it was the only reason she let him walk out the door. But at the doorway, she caught his sleeve one last time. "Promise me," she said. "Whatever you learn, you will not stretch it out to wound anyone. A lie kept too long stops being a test and becomes a cruelty. Fix it before the truth fixes itself. Do you hear me?" "I hear you, Mama," Chidi said. And he meant it, though he did not yet know how hard that promise would be to keep. Saturday came with a hard white sun. The dust had not lifted. By 10 in the morning, the compound was full of relations Ihuoma rarely saw except at funerals and money. Aunties in stiff lace and head ties tall as crowns. Uncles in heavy agbada fanning themselves. Ezine moved among them like a hostess at her own party, accepting compliments she had done nothing to earn, while Ihuoma stayed in the small back room in a borrowed wrapper, her hair plaited simply by a neighbor girl who had taken pity on her. Then someone at the gate began to laugh. It started as one voice, a young cousin near the wall, and then it jumped from mouth to mouth across the whole compound, fast as fire in dry grass. Ihuoma heard it through the thin window louvres, and her stomach dropped before she even knew the cause. She pressed her face to the glass. A man was wheeling a bicycle through the open gate. And what a bicycle! The frame was eaten orange with rust, the chain hung slack, one pedal was a bare metal stub, and the back wheel wobbled as though it might leave the rim at any moment. The man pushing it wore a plain off-white shirt gone the color of weak tea. The sleeves rolled to the elbow, dust and dried mud streaked up one side of it, as though he had fallen somewhere on the road. His trousers were faded, his sandals were worn down at the heel. Across the carrier of the bicycle was tied a small bundle, and balanced on top, a single calabash of palm wine and a head of kola nut wrapped in green leaves. "Is that the groom?" Someone shrieked, delighted. "That is the groom?" Ezine came out onto the forecourt with her phone already raised, filming, her mouth open with laughter. I have to post this. Nobody will believe me. He came on a bicycle. A bicycle. Her thumb stabbed at the screen. My sister is marrying a man who cannot afford Okada fare. The uncles laughed into their fists. Ulari laughed openly, her gold rings flashing as she pointed. A reacting wall of bright Ankara and white lace and tan agbada, every finger lifted toward the gate, every mouth round with mockery. Mazi Obiora did not laugh. He stood near his chair with his eyes on the ground, and the shame on his face was not for the groom. It was for himself. Chidi propped the bicycle against the wall with great care, as if it were a thoroughbred he was stabling. He straightened his dusty shirt. Then he walked to the center of the forecourt, knelt, and set the kola nut and the palm wine on the bare concrete before the elders, the way a proper man does. His head bowed. "Good morning, my fathers," he said. His voice was low and steady, and it cut through the laughter cleanly. "Good morning, my mothers. My name is Chidi. I have come with the blessing of my own people to ask for a wife from this house." A heavy uncle leaned forward. "And what do you do, young man? How will you feed a wife?" "I work," Chidi said simply. "I am good with my hands. I will never let her go hungry, and I will never raise my voice or my hand to her. That is all I can promise. The rest, God will provide." "He works." Ezine snorted, lowering her phone at last. "Doing what? Pushing that bicycle uphill?" A ripple of laughter again. Chidi turned his head toward her, unhurried, and looked at her with those steady eyes until her smile faltered. "Doing whatever honest work I am given," he said quietly. "There is no shame in a man's sweat. The shame is only in his cruelty." The words were soft, but they made the courtyard go still for a breath. Ulari covered the silence quickly. "Bring out the girl," she called. "Bring out Ihuoma. Let her come and see the king who has come for her." They brought Ihuoma out. She crossed the forecourt with her eyes down, feeling every stare like a hand on her skin, certain she would find a broken-down old man or a fool. She knelt before the elders as custom required. And when at last she lifted her face to look at the stranger she was to marry, she found him already looking at her. And he was not what she had braced for at all. He was young, he was tall. There was dust on his shirt and his sandals were worn, yes. But his face was open and kind, and his eyes, when they met hers, held no mockery, no greed, only a strange, steady warmth, as though he already knew her and was glad to find her exactly as she was. For one foolish moment, Ihuoma forgot the laughter ringing in the yard. "This is the groom," Mazi Obiora said heavily. "Chidi, he has come for you, my daughter. Will you have him?" Ihuoma should have said the words that were expected, the obedient yes. Instead, she heard herself ask the man directly, in a voice almost too low to carry, "Why me? You have not even seen me before today." Chidi answered before her stepmother could. "Because I asked your father for the daughter that this house had forgotten," he said. "And a forgotten thing is often the most precious thing in the room." Someone laughed at that too, but Ihuoma did not hear them. She was looking at a poor man in a dusty shirt who had just said the kindest thing anyone had said to her in years. And she gave her answer to him and not to the crowd. "Then I will have him," she said. So it was settled in front of all of them. The introduction became the engagement in the same breath. 2 ceremonies folded into one to save a poor family, a second day of cooking and renting chairs. The kola nut was broken. The palm wine went round, though the rich uncles wrinkled their noses at the cheap brand and set their cups down half full. And through all of it, Ezine stood by the wall editing her video, adding laughing faces to it deciding which of her friends would find it funniest. "At least we know one thing," she said to her mother, loud enough for Ihuoma to hear as the couple were led apart. "When they have children, the children will inherit a bicycle." The marriage proper was held the following Saturday, and it was, by the standards of that compound, almost nothing. No canopy, no live band. A single cooler of jollof rice and a pot of soup that Ulari had grudgingly approved set out on a folding table under the lone mango tree. Ihuoma wore a maroon and gold wrapper that her late mother had left behind. And around her neck, the neighbor girl had fastened a small string of coral beads, real ones, the only thing of value Ihuoma owned. Threaded into her hair were more coral beads, a modest little crown of them. She looked, though no one said so, beautiful. Chidi arrived again on the bicycle. This time the uncles barely bothered to laugh. They had used up their best jokes the week before. The brief ceremony was performed. The prayers said, and when the time came for the bride to be carried to her husband's home, there was no car waiting. There was only the rusted bicycle. "Climb on, then," Ezine called, gleeful, raising her phone for the second time. "Your chariot awaits, Your Highness. Side saddle so the kingdom can see you." Ihuoma's face burned. But Chidi, settling onto the bicycle seat, looked back at her over his shoulder, and there was no embarrassment in him at all, only that quiet warmth. "It is not far," he said gently, just to her, "and I will not let you fall. I promise you that, now and always. Will you trust me?" She looked at his outstretched hand. She thought of the marble-cold yard behind her, the laughter, the years of being the cracked plate nobody wanted. She put her hand in his and climbed up behind him, sitting side saddle on the carrier, her coral crown catching the light, her arms going round his waist. And so the bride left her father's house on the back of a broken bicycle, while 36 well-dressed relations laughed and pointed and filmed, certain they were watching the lowest moment of a poor girl's poor life. They were watching the beginning of her crown, but none of them knew it yet. Neither did she. The journey was not far, as he had said, but it was far enough to leave Oweri's loud streets behind. They turned off the tarred road onto a quieter lane lined with flame trees. And Ihuoma, expecting a one-room face-me-I-face-you in some crowded yard, began to brace herself for whatever poverty waited at the end. Instead, the lane grew greener, cleaner. The houses behind the walls grew larger. "Where do you live?" she asked against his back. "Just ahead," Chidi said. "We are nearly home." He stopped the bicycle not at a gate, but beside it, against a long whitewashed wall, where a small wooden door stood ajar. Beyond it was a single modest room with a narrow bed, a kerosene stove, a table, 2 chairs, and 1 shuttered window. It was clean and bare, a workman's room. "It is not much," Chidi said, watching her face carefully. "But it is honest, and it is ours. Are you ashamed?" Ihuoma stepped inside and set down her small bundle. She looked at the swept floor and the neatly folded blanket and the single cup and the single plate, and something in her chest eased rather than tightened. "No," she said. "In my father's house there were soft chairs and gold rings and a parlor with a television, and I was hungry every single day of my life. Hungry for someone to be kind to me. This room is bare, but you have been kinder to me in 2 Saturdays than that whole compound was in 20 years. She turned to him. "I am not ashamed. I am only afraid." "Of what?" "That you will become like them. That kindness is a thing you are wearing for now, and one day you will take it off." Chidi was quiet for a moment. Then he crossed the small room, took both her hands and looked at her with such open honesty that she believed him before he even spoke. "I will never take it off," he said. "You have my word as a man, and I will tell you now. There are things about me you do not yet know. When the time is right, I will show you all of them, and I pray you will not be angry. But hear this part, because it has no secret hidden in it, and it never will. Today, and on the day I die, the truest thing about me is that I see you, the real you, and I am not going anywhere." She did not understand the first part of what he said, but she held on to the last part. And that night, in the bare little room, for the first time in years, Ihuoma slept without listening for footsteps in the dark. The weeks that followed were the gentlest she had ever known. Chidi left each morning, he said, for work, and came back each evening, his shirt dustier than before, smelling of cement or earth or sawdust, depending on the day. He brought home small things, a bag of oranges, a length of cheap ankara for her, a used radio that he fixed at the table while she cooked, until music filled the little room. He never spoke of money, and she never asked. They were poor, and she was happy. And for a long time, those two things sat side by side in her without quarreling. One Tuesday, Chidi pressed a few crumpled Naira notes into her palm before he left, and asked her to go to the great market for soup ingredients, because his work would keep him out until dark. He did not tell her which market, only that the big one was cheapest. So Ihuoma tied her plainest wrapper, knotted her headscarf, and walked the long way into the heart of Owerri, to the famous Ekiudo market, the largest in the city, a roaring maze of stalls under faded umbrellas where 10,000 voices haggled at once. She did not know, as she squeezed between the crates of ugu and bitterleaf, that every stall around her stood on land her own husband's family owned. She knew only that her few notes had to stretch, and that the sun was hot, and that her slippers were thin against the wet ground. At a stall heavy with dried fish, she stopped to ask the price, and the voice that answered her turned her cold. "What do you want, woman? Are you buying or just blocking my stall?" She knew that voice. She lifted her eyes, and there, behind the fish, fanning himself with a folded newspaper, sat the very uncle who had laughed loudest at her wedding gate. He rented this stall. He did not recognize her at first, sweat-damp and plain in the crowd, just another poor customer counting coins. "How much for the small heap of fish, please?" Ihuoma said quietly. He named a price that was nearly double what the next stall would charge. Ihuoma counted the notes in her palm once more, slowly, and looked up. "That is too high, uncle," she said gently. "The woman by the gate is selling the same fish for less. Will you not bring it down a little? I am cooking for two." "Bring it down." The uncle let out a short laugh and looked left and right, inviting the stalls around him to enjoy it. "You hear this one? She comes to my stall with the price of a sweet, and she wants to bargain like a senator's wife." He leaned forward over the dried fish, and his voice dropped into the flat cruelty of a man who has decided a person is beneath him. "If that is all you have, go to the back of the market where the spoiled fish is sold. People like you cannot afford front stall goods." He waved the newspaper at her, shooing a fly. "Move! You are scattering my customers." A younger trader at the next stall, a wiry boy with a gold tooth, leaned on his crate of crayfish and snickered. "Leave her, Oga. Maybe her husband will come and pay you, if she even has a husband." He looked her plain wrapper up and down. What man would carry this one? The laughter spread to a third stall, then a fourth. Ihuoma felt the old heat climb her neck, the heat of 100 such dismissals, the same heat that had crawled up her face on her wedding day, while 3 dozen relations pointed at a bicycle. For a moment, Her hand tightened around the few thin notes until the paper bit her palm. She thought of what she could say. She thought of who her husband was, though the truth of that was still hidden even from her. And she thought of how good it would feel to lift her chin and put this man in his place. She did none of it. Instead, she noticed, on the ground beside the uncle's feet, that his money bowl had tipped against the leg of his stool, and a scatter of his own coins had rolled into the mud where he had not seen them. Naira spinning to rest in the wet gray filth between the crates. She crouched down right there in the dirt before the whole sneering row, gathered the coins one by one, wiped each one clean on the hem of her wrapper, and set them back in his bowl. "Your money fell, uncle?" she said simply, rising. "You would not want to lose it. Thank you for your time. God bless your trade today." The gold-toothed boy's smile slid off his face. The uncle opened his mouth, but no insult came out of it, because there is no ready insult for a person who has just knelt in the mud to save your money while you spat on her. He looked from the clean coins in his bowl to the plain woman walking away, and something he could not name moved in his chest and was gone. And she walked to the back of the market, bought the cheaper fish without complaint, and went home. The uncle stared after her, troubled by something in the gentle plain woman he could not name, and then forgot her before she had even reached the end of the row. One more face stepped over and gone. He would remember her again very soon, and the memory would taste like ash. That same week, Chidi tested her in a way his mother would have scolded him for, had she known. He came home one evening with his shoulders low and his face drawn, and he sat heavily at the little table without a word. Ihuoma set his food before him, but he did not touch it. "What is wrong?" she asked, kneeling beside his chair. "You are not eating." "I lost the work," Chidi said. He did not look at her. "The man I was building for has run out of money. He has sent us all away. There is nothing now, Ihuoma. No work, no pay. I do not even know how we will buy food next week." He let his head sink into his hands. "I have brought you to nothing. I have failed you. Maybe your stepmother was right. Maybe you should have married a man who could give you more than an empty pot." It was a lie, every word of it, and a cruel one. And even as he spoke it, some part of him hated himself and heard his mother's warning in his ear. But he had to know. He had to be sure. He waited for the complaint, the sigh, the first crack of resentment that he had seen open in other women when the money ran dry. Instead, Ihuoma took his hands away from his face and held them in both of hers. "Look at me," she said. He looked. Her eyes were clear and steady. "We are not nothing. We have this room, and we have each other. And tomorrow there will be other work, because you are strong and you are honest, and honest hands never stay empty for long." She smiled. "I have been poor my whole life, Chidi. I know how to stretch 1 cup of Gary into 3 days. What I never had before was a man who came home to me. So do not talk to me about failing. The only way you could ever fail me is by leaving. Are you leaving?" "No," he said, and his voice was rough. "Never." "Then we have lost nothing." She picked up his spoon and pressed it into his hand. "Now eat. A man cannot look for work on an empty stomach. We will be fine. I promise you that, now and always." It was his own promise, the words he had said to her on the bicycle. Turned around and handed gently back. Chidi looked at this woman, who had just been told they were ruined, and had answered him with comfort. And he had to turn his face to the window so she would not see what it did to him. That night, he lay awake long after she slept, listening to her quiet breathing. And he made up his mind that the lie had gone far enough. It was time to bring her home. His mother had been right. A test pass this completely did not deserve to be stretched one day longer. But she was not the only one watching that little room. What Ihuoma did not know was where Chidi went each morning when he wheeled the bicycle out of sight around the corner. 3 streets away, behind a high gate guarded by men in dark uniforms, the bicycle would be wheeled into a covered yard. The dusty shirt would come off, folded away in a locker like a costume between acts, and the same young man would walk through tall glass doors into the head office of one of the largest property and trading companies in the whole of Owerri, where the staff would rise from their desks and lower their heads and call him sir. The very morning he had gone home to play at being a ruined workman, a manager in a sharp gray suit had hurried to meet him in the cool marble lobby, a folder of papers held out in both hands. "Good morning, sir. The Eke Udo stall accounts you asked for." The man fell into step beside him, lowering his voice. "Sir, the traders are behind again on this quarter's fees. Several of them. Your father says we should send the notices and lock the defaulters out by month end. Do you want me to begin?" Chidi took the folder and turned the pages as the lift carried them up. He stopped at one column, and his finger rested a moment on a name he knew, a name that rented a fish stall and had laughed loudest at a wedding gate not long ago. "Send no notices yet," Chidi said. "Nobody loses a stall this month. Times are hard in the market, and I refuse to put a family on the street to make a number look better on a page." He closed the folder. "Tell my father I said so. He will grumble, and then he will agree, because he taught me that himself before he forgot it." The manager blinked, unused to mercy in that building, then bowed his head. "Yes, sir." His father telephoned within the hour, the deep voice filling the office. "You are soft," Chief Madueke said, though there was no real anger in it. "You let the whole market owe you, and you ride a bicycle home to a one-room house. What kind of heir have I raised?" "The kind you raised on purpose," Chidi answered. And on the other end of the line, his father laughed, low and pleased, and let the matter drop. For Chidi was the only son of Chief Madueke, the man whose name was on the deeds of half the city, the estates where the rich uncles rented their offices, the great Eke Udo market where traders, including some of Ihuoma's own relations, paid their stall fees every month, the vast tracts of land on the edge of town that were rising into new estates. All of it bore the family's name, and all of it would one day bear Chidi's. Each evening, before he turned the last corner home, Chidi would put the dusty shirt back on over the fine one, smear a little of the road onto his sleeve, and become a workman again. His mother hated it. His father, it turned out, had laughed when he first heard, and then gone quiet, and then said only, "Bring the girl to the house when you are ready. Let me see the kind of woman who could make my son ride a bicycle." That day came sooner than Chidi planned, and not in the way he wanted, because secrets in a city are never as safe as the people keeping them believe. It was a market trader who first put it together. The man rented a stall in Eke Udo, and one morning he saw stepping out of a long white SUV at the company gate a young man whose face he was certain he had seen before, pushing a bicycle at a poor man's wedding not 2 months past. He told his wife. His wife told her sister. The sister sold cloth 2 stalls down from a woman who happened to be Ulari's cousin. And so, on a heavy gray afternoon, Ulari sat in her parlor and listened to her cousin lean across the center table and whisper a thing that made the gold rings still on her fingers. "They are saying," the cousin breathed, "that the bicycle boy, the one your husband gave Ihuoma to, is no workman at all. They are saying he is the son of Chief Madueke himself." that the bicycle was a disguise, that your stepdaughter is married to one of the richest families in Oweri. For a long moment, Ulari said nothing. Then she laughed, a hard, disbelieving laugh, because the alternative was unbearable. Nonsense, she said. If that were true, that girl would be living in a palace, not a face me, I face you. You have been listening to market gossip. But the seed was planted, and all night it put down roots in the dark of her chest. Ulari did not sleep that night. She lay beside her snoring husband and turned the thought over and over. If it were true, if the cracked plate she had thrown away had landed in gold, if Ezine, her own beautiful daughter, still weeks away from marrying the son of a Lagos trader, was about to be outshone by the stepdaughter they had laughed off the property on a rusted bicycle. By morning, she had decided she would find out for herself. And if it was true, she would find a way to fix it. Because in Ulari's mind, a fortune that large belonged with her own blood, not with Ihuoma. She did not have to wait long, because Chief Madueke had decided the same week that it was time to bring his son's wife home. The invitation arrived at Mazi Obiora's compound by hand, carried by a uniformed driver who stepped out of a gleaming white SUV that filled the whole lane. It was thick cream paper, edged in gold. The relations who happened to be visiting crowded to read it over Ulari's shoulder, and the parlor went silent. The family of Chief Madueke requested the honor of the presence of Mazi Obiora and his household at a Thanksgiving and homecoming, held in honor of the marriage of their son Chidi to his wife, at the family estate the following Saturday. Madueke? An uncle whispered, the very one who had pointed and jeered hardest at the bicycle. That Madueke? The one who owns the new estates on the airport road? He sat down slowly, gripping the edge of the table. The one who owns the market where my own office stands? The one whose stall fees I pay every single month? Ezine snatched the card and read it 3 times, her face draining. It is a mistake, she said. It has to be a mistake. Ihuoma did not marry into that family. She married a bricklayer. We all saw the bicycle. But the SUV in the lane was not a mistake, and the gold-edged card was not a mistake. And as the driver pulled smoothly away, the whole compound was left staring at one another with a new and dreadful understanding climbing slowly up their spines. They had laughed. They had pointed. They had filmed it and shared it. And the man they had laughed at owned the very ground beneath half their lives. We are going, Ulari said at last, her voice strange and tight. All of us. And nobody will mention that bicycle again. Do you hear me? In the small bare room 3 streets from the company gate, Ihuoma had not seen the gold-edged card. She knew only that her husband had come home that evening unusually quiet, and that he had sat across from her at the little table and taken her hands. On Saturday, he said, I am taking you to meet my family. My father has asked for you. Ihuoma's heart lifted and then immediately sank. Your family. She looked down at her hands in his, at her 2 wrappers and her 1 good pair of slippers. Chidi, I have nothing to wear to meet your people. I do not want to shame you in front of your mother. Chidi smiled. But there was something new in it now. Something under the warmth that she could not read. Something close to sorrow. You could never shame me, he said. Not in any cloth on earth. But you will not go in rags either. Tomorrow something will be brought for you. Will you trust me? One more time. I have trusted you every day since the bicycle, she said. Why would I stop now? He brought her hand to his lips. Tomorrow you will understand a great many things, he said. And I am asking you, before you do, to remember tonight Remember that you married me when you thought I had nothing. I will need you to remember that. It matters more than you know." She did not understand, but she nodded, and she remembered, and she would be glad later that she did. The next day, while Chidi was at his work, a car came to the back lane. Not the bicycle this time, but a quiet gray car, and from it stepped an older woman in a fine but simple wrapper, with kind, shrewd eyes and a way of holding her head that Ihuoma recognized somehow, before a single word was spoken. Behind her, 2 younger women carried boxes and garment bags. "You must be Ihuoma," the woman said, taking both her hands and studying her face with frank, searching attention. "I am Nwadiuto. I am Chidi's mother." Ihuoma began to lower herself to her knees in greeting, as a good wife should before her husband's mother. But Nwadiuto caught her by the elbows and would not let her kneel. "No," she said, with sudden feeling. "No, my daughter. You have knelt enough in your life. I can see it on you. From today, you kneel only to God." And then, to Ihuoma's astonishment, the older woman's eyes filled, and she pulled the younger woman into an embrace, holding her tightly, the way a mother holds a child she has been waiting a long time to meet. "You married my son when you thought he was a poor man," Nwadiuto whispered against her hair. "Do you know how long I've prayed for a girl who would do that? Do you know how rare you are?" Ihuoma stood very still in the embrace, her mind turning slowly, the strange half-things her husband had said for weeks, beginning at last to line up into a shape she was afraid to look at directly. "His mother," she said carefully when they parted. "You came in a car, with these things." She glanced at the boxes. "Ma, please. Who is my husband?" Nwadiuto held her gaze for a long, gentle moment. "On Saturday," she said, "you will see for yourself, and you will see at the same time as the people who laughed at you, which is exactly as my son wants it, the stubborn boy. Now." She clapped her hands once, briskly, blinking away the last of her tears. "Let us see about getting my daughter dressed like the wife of the man she actually married." What was in the boxes? Ihuoma could hardly believe her hands as she touched it. A full bridal regalia in deep jewel tones, a wrapper of maroon and gold richer than anything in Izine's whole wardrobe. And coral. So much coral. Heavy coral bead necklaces in stacked rows, coral bracelets, and a true coral crown, the kind worn by the daughters and wives of great houses. Gold glinted at every join. When they finished dressing her, when they sat her before the mirror and stepped back, Ihuoma did not recognize the woman looking back. She was still herself, the same large dark eyes, the same gentle face, but she was crowned. "There," Nwadiuto said softly behind her. "Now the cloth on the outside matches the heart that was always on the inside. Saturday, my daughter. Whatever you see, whoever you see standing in that crowd, lift your chin and do not lower it. You have earned every eye in the place." Saturday came bright and clear. The harmattan dust finally lifted, the sky a clean, hard blue over Owerri. The estate of Chief Madueke sat behind tall white walls on the good side of town. And when the gates rolled open, even the proud relations from Ihuoma's compound fell silent in their hired bus. A long curving drive led up to a great white mansion with columns across the front, balconies above, and a forecourt of pale polished stone where a row of luxury cars already gleamed in the sun. Uniformed staff lined the steps. Canopies of white and gold stretched across the grounds, beneath which hundreds of important guests sat at dressed tables, the cream of the city in their finest lace and Isiagu and gold. Ulari got off the bus first, in the brightest, heaviest outfit she owned, with Ezina beside her in a white gown she had bought specially, determined to outshine whatever poor wife would be presented. Mazi Obiora came last, slow and uncertain, his good Agbada suddenly looking shabby against all that splendor. The uncles tugged at their collars. Nobody mentioned the bicycle. They were shown to seats, not at the front where family sat, but to one side, among the lesser guests, and Ulari's mouth tightened at the slight even as she smiled and smiled. A man rose to speak from the high table. He was perhaps 60, broad and powerful, in magnificent red isiagu and a chief's red cap heavy with eagle feathers, coral thick at his throat. The whole gathering hushed at the lift of his hand. "My people," Chief Madueke said, and his deep voice rolled across the forecourt. "You all know me. You know what God has given this family, the estates, the market, the land from here to the airport road." A murmur of acknowledgement moved through the canopies. For years I have asked myself one question. When I am gone, and all of this passes to my only son, how will I know that the woman beside him loves the man, and not the mountain of things the man owns? He let the question hang. Among the side tables, Ulari had gone very still. "So my son did a bold thing," the chief went on, and now the ghost of a smile touched his hard mouth. "A thing I myself once did, long ago, to win his mother. He put away his name, he put away his cars, he put on the clothes of a poor workman, and he went out to find a wife who would love him with empty hands. Today, my people, he has come home, and he has not come home alone." Heads turned. High above the forecourt, a door at the very crest of the grand steps opened, and out walked Chidi, but not the Chidi of the back lane. Gone were the dusty shirt and the worn sandals. He came down the wide steps in full splendor, in red and gold isiagu that matched his father's, coral at his throat, his head high, every inch the air to half a city. A sound went through the crowd, and over among the lesser guests, Ulari's hired smile froze and cracked. "It cannot be," Ezine whispered. "It cannot be him. It cannot." It was him, and he was not alone, because on his arm, descending the great staircase step by careful step, was a woman in jewel-tone bridal coral, a maroon and gold wrapper rich as wine, a coral crown upon her head, her large dark eyes shining, her chin lifted exactly as her husband's mother had told her to lift it. It took the whole compound a full, terrible moment to recognize her. It was Ihuoma, the cracked plate, the forgotten daughter, the girl they had laughed off the property on the back of a rusted bicycle. She came down the staircase of the great house on the arm of its heir, crowned in coral, and the hundreds of important guests rose to their feet and began to applaud, while at the side tables 3 faces turned the color of ash. Chidi led his wife to the high table and stood before all of them. He did not gloat. He did not even raise his voice. But he looked once, slowly, across the crowd, until his steady gaze found the side tables, found Ulari, found Ezini, found the heavy uncle who had jeered hardest at his gate, and who now could not meet his eyes. "Some of you here today," he said, and the courtyard fell utterly silent. "Met me 2 months ago. You met me at a small compound, on a bicycle, in a dusty shirt." A ripple ran through the guests. "You laughed at me. You pointed. You filmed it, I am told, and you shared it for your friends to enjoy." He paused. "I am not angry. A man learns the most about people in the moment they believe he is beneath them." Ezine's phone was nowhere in sight now. Her hands were knotted in her white skirt. "You gave me this woman," Chidi went on, his voice softening as he turned to Ihuoma, "as the one your house had thrown away. You gave me what you thought was your least, and you handed me, without knowing it, the very best thing in that compound. He took Ihuoma's hand. She married me when she counted me as poor. She fed me and washed my one shirt, and never once asked me for money, because she did not know there was any to ask for. She loved the man, only the man. He looked back at the crowd. That is worth more than every deed with my family's name on it. And so before all of you, I want it known. Everything I have, she shares, not as a reward, as her right, because she is the only one who ever earned it. The applause that rose then was thunder. Ihuoma stood in the center of it, crowned and shaking, tears running freely down her face. And for once in her life, they were not tears she had to hide. At the side tables, Ulari sat frozen. The gossip of her cousin made flesh in front of the whole city. Every gold ring on her fingers suddenly worthless. Ezine had begun to cry, but no one looked at her. No one comforted her, and that wounded her most of all. For she had spent her whole life as the one all eyes followed. And now the eyes had found another and would not come back. Mazio Biora had risen halfway from his chair, one trembling hand pressed to his mouth, and he was weeping too. But his were a father's tears, shame and wonder tangled together past separating. It was not yet over, though, because the proud do not always go quietly. As the formal speeches gave way to music and feasting, Ulari pushed back her chair. She had decided, with the reckless speed of someone who has already lost and is gambling the last of her dignity, that there might still be a place at this table for her own blood, if she was quick and clever enough. She crossed the forecourt to where Ihuoma stood, fixed a wide, warm smile on her face, and opened her arms, as though for an embrace. "My daughter," she cried, loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. "My own dear Ihuoma, did I not always say you were special? Did I not always treat you as my very own? Look at you now, my pride, my joy." Ihuoma looked at the outstretched arms. She looked at the smiling face that had called her a cracked plate 2 months before, and the whole crowd nearby went quiet to watch. "Mama Ulari?" Ihuoma said. Her voice did not shake now. "You did say many things to me. I remember every one of them." Ulari's smile strained. "Children misremember. We were always good to you. Family is family." "You are right that family is family," Ihuoma said gently. "And so I will not curse you, and I will not shame you the way you shamed me, because I am not made the way you are made, and I thank God for it every day." A breath. "But I will not stand here and call a lie the truth, not even to be kind. You did not treat me as your own. You gave me a way to be laughed at." She turned and looked at Chidi, and her face softened past anything Ulari could fake. "And the man you gave me turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. So go and sit down, Mama. Eat. There is plenty. You are a guest in my husband's house, and you will be treated as one. That is more than you ever gave me." It was not a slap. It was worse. It was mercy, delivered in front of everyone, and mercy from the one you have wronged is a heavier thing to carry than any curse. Ulari lowered her arms. She walked back to the side table with her head down for the first time in her life, and she did not lift it again all day. Ezine tried too later, cornering her stepsister near the cake. "Ihuoma," she said, the bright laugh gone entirely from her voice. "Please, my wedding is in 3 weeks. Chukwuma's people are flying in. If your husband would just attend, even for an hour, if people saw that I am connected to this family." Ihuoma turned and looked at the stepsister who had filmed her humiliation twice and laughed both times. You want to borrow my husband's name, she said slowly, to impress people at your wedding. Ezine flushed. It is not like that. It is exactly like that. But Ihuoma's eyes, when she had spoken, were not hard. They were tired and a little sad. Ezine, you have a man who is marrying you. Whether he is rich or poor, if he is kind, you will be the richest woman in Owerri. I learned that sitting side saddle on a broken bicycle. Stop measuring your worth against mine. Go and love your husband, and let his name be enough. She reached out and, to Ezine's shock, took her hand for a moment. I will pray your marriage is a kind one. I mean it. That is the only gift I have that is worth anything. She let the hand go and walked back to Chidi. And Ezine stood alone by the cake, wondering for once in her life whether all the laughter she had chased and collected and posted had ever been worth a single quiet ride home with someone who loved her. Evening came down golden over the great estate. The guests feasted late under strings of warm light, and the band played, and Ihuoma sat beside her husband at the high table where she had been told she did not belong. Crowned in coral, the wife of the heir to half the city, and she had not changed at all. She still saw the serving girl struggling with a heavy tray and rose, in her bridal regalia, to steady it. She still slipped a wrapped plate of food to the driver who had carried them, and a kind word to the old gateman. Nwadiuto watched her do these things from across the forecourt and pressed a hand to her own chest and turned to her husband. You see, she said softly, crowned and still herself. That is the one we prayed for. Chief Madueke nodded slowly, watching the girl move among his guests with her quiet warmth. Our son chose well, he said. Better than I knew. He lifted his cup. A poor heart in a rich house is the poorest thing on earth. But a rich heart in any house at all. He looked at Ihuoma, kneeling now beside an elderly aunt to hear her better over the music. That is a fortune no market can sell. Late that night, when the guests had gone and the lights were being put out one by one, Chidi found Ihuoma standing alone at the top of the great staircase, looking down at the empty forecourt where the whole city had applauded her. Regret it? He asked, coming to stand beside her. Wish I had told you the truth sooner? Ihuoma was quiet for a while. Then she shook her head. If you had told me sooner, she said, I would never have known for certain why I loved you. Now I know. I loved you on a bicycle, with one shirt and a kerosene stove, when there was nothing in it for me but you. She turned to him. I would marry you again tomorrow, on the bicycle, in front of all of them, and I would not change one single thing. Chidi drew her in, and for a long moment they stood at the top of the staircase of the house he had hidden from her. The workman and the forgotten daughter, who had found in each other the one thing that all the deeds and markets and estates in Owerri could never have bought. Then I will keep the bicycle, he said into her hair, and she felt him smile. Always. So we never forget where the crown really came from. And he kept his word. For years afterward, parked in the great garage of the estate, gleaming now with care, polished though no one ever rode it, sat a rusted old bicycle that the staff were under strict instruction never to throw away. Guests who asked about it were told only that it was the most valuable thing the family owned. And the heir and his wife, when they passed it, would share a glance that no one else in the world could read. Ihuoma never lost the gentleness that the bicycle had bought her. She built homes for forgotten daughters, girls thrown away by the people who should have loved them, and she ran them herself. And to every girl who came through her gates, frightened and ashamed, she would say the same thing. Hold your head up, she would tell them, fastening a string of beads around a thin, trembling neck. The world may call you the cracked plate nobody wants. But God has a way of taking exactly what they threw away and setting it at the head of the table. And then she would smile. I should know. I came here on a broken bicycle. So this is where I will leave you tonight, with a forgotten daughter crowned in coral at the head of a great table, and the proud who laughed at her sitting silent below. Remember what we said at the very beginning, before any of it began. Not every poor-looking man is a poor man, and not every laughing mouth is a happy one. Kindness, in the end, is the only wealth that no one can take from you, and the only one God always repays. If this story touched your heart, do me one kindness in return. Tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from tonight, so I can see how far this little story has traveled. And if you would have married the man on the bicycle, type the word crown, and let us see how many of you have the kind of heart that this whole story was about. Stay, because there is another one coming, and the next forgotten daughter is already on her way to her own table.